Hi, MC Bling Daddy here, and welcome back to another segment in a series exploring how one might use command blocks for coding as you would in a programming language such as C# or Java. To this point, we have created an infinite loop that will extend a railway under a minecart any distance into the plus Z direction. Today we are going to move in the plus X direction, and as you can see we have some trees in the way, so one of the things that we'll have to do is to put in some air blocks to remove things as we go. And the other is that we are going to convert our infinite loop into a finite loop, also called a while loop. And in order to do that, I need to find out where the minecart is, and it is roughly 33 in the plus Z direction. So let's go back to our command block area, take a look and see what we've got, and get started working on extending things here. So one of the first things is we were going to add some air blocks. Let's see which one it is here. Yes, okay, so we are extending things in the plus X direction, and our command here, execute, says take an entity of type minecart writable, which is what you call a minecart unless you have something in it. And with reference to that, go one in the X direction, the plus X direction. Then we'll fill in a bunch of air blocks, and as it turns out, in the minus Z direction, that's one to the left and at the same height and X as the minecart. And then plus 3 means in Y goes 3 up, and in the Z direction go plus 1, so we end up with a block of blocks, air blocks, that fill in to the X direction from our minecart. So that's in addition to our putting in dirt and a couple of rails, well, a rail, and a movement of the minecart one in the X direction. Let's see if that's here. That's putting in our rail, so it's the one back in the back that actually transports now our minecart in the X direction, which would be here. So what we had in the past was we actually had a set of repeaters that took our output from our transport block and just fed the signal around to our first block, and we did it in such a way the first block would start up again and things would just continue on around in an infinite loop, because there was nothing to stop it. So what we're going to do today is we're going to show how you might stop the minecart or the railway from being extended, and that is by testing where the minecart is and finding out whether it is within the range that you want to be. So here's the TestFor command, and again we're looking for an entity, which a minecart is, and what the R equals 32 says is that the minecart has to be within 32 blocks of this command block. Well, as you saw earlier, the minecart was at plus 33 in the Z direction, and this command block is somewhat negative, has a few negative blocks from 0. So the minecart is beyond 32. So in other words, this test should fail. It should not work. It should be negative. So let's take a look and see what happens when we do that, though. What we need is something that will accept that failure and that will be a comparator. So the comparator, what the comparator does is it takes the number of the count of successes from the block that does the test for, and if it is 1 or more, then it will output a signal. And in this case, we're expecting that there will be no mine carts that are less than 32 away. So at the moment, the result should be negative. But now what we have to do, and the reason why we use a comparator here is because it takes that signal rather than the other signal generated by this block. And the other signal generated by this block is just an I've completed my work test. And so what we use for that is just a repeater to say, okay, this block is done, and we'll feed it into something else. And the comparator says, specifically it found something within a radius of 32 or not. And we're not going to put anything into this command block simply because we want to turn a corner. So, and we don't want to use Redstone at this point, simply because Redstone creates problems. It is not directional, and it can give you errors that you don't want to have to worry about. Errors in the sense of that it does more things than you're expecting. So what we're going to do then is we're going to use the signal from this command block which says I'm done, and we are going to feed it into what ultimately will be, without going into the details here, you can look up the logic for yourself on the wiki. It's a very interesting commentary on logic. But we are going to feed these signals into a set of blocks that are, or that create an AND logic. So what we do here then is we put down between these torches redstone, and then we'll put down a torch that will be our output. And what will happen is that for this AND, when both this block, which has our test for, and this block, which turns the corner on the comparator, have signals that come out, this torch will go off, this torch will go off, and as a consequence, this torch will go on. So then what we need to do is we need to feed the output here back to, we'll do this with repeaters just for now. Need to be back a little bit. We'll feed that with repeaters into this block, again, which just simply turns a corner, because the repeaters go straight ahead and they don't go sideways. So one more thing that we need to do, though, and that is because there's an extra step in here for this comparator, we need to delay the output that says, I'm done, are we going to go on and do this again? We have to delay that output from this block by 1. Okay, so we now have completed our loop. We've changed an infinite loop into a loop that has a test. And hopefully, if I've done everything right, it will feed a signal back around and start the loop again if there is a minecart within, in this case, 32. And we've made that test, and the AND circuit has fed the signal through. So let's test it out. It shouldn't go through more than one time. Here is our signal, that our button that will start off the infinite loop, if it was infinite, or in this case the while loop, since it's finite. And let's see what's going on. Okay, so we did come around here. You saw this torch flicker, But the comparator did not go on, and what that says is that the test was negative, that there is not a minecart within 32. But let's go take a look at our minecart and see what happened, because it did move. And the reason for that is because when I pushed the button, the first commands of the loop executed before the test was actually made. As you can see, our minecart did move, and it looks like it's starting to move into the tree. We hope that the air blocks will block that out next time. And so as a consequence, you see we've executed the while loop in one of the two ways that it normally operates. One of the ways is with the test before the execution of the loop starts. The other way, as we've done it, is that we execute the loop once before we make our test. And as you can see, when we do that, we actually do what we want to do without testing to see whether it can be done. So, as a consequence, usually the test is done beforehand, before the execution of the rest of the loop, or before the execution of the loop. But in this case, it worked out. We could actually go executing one at a time if we wanted to. Just pressing the button, seeing where the minecart goes. But now, let's take a look and see what happens. So since our minecart was 33 plus Z, and this block is negative something, let's set our radius to be something where we know that the test will actually work out. And something like 50, a radius of 50, should be good to go. So let's try that, and we'll see what happens when we start execution. So we're going to take a quick look at the minecart and see how it moves, and then we're going to go back over to our comparator. So there we go, and we execute again, and we're taking a look. And now, if you take a look, our comparator is on. And if you take a look at the text that's scrolling by, you'll notice that we feed the signal through, and the loop gets re-executed, and at the bottom of the scrolling text, it says that it found an entity, minecart writable, and then the rest of it is that it re-executed the code. And so it stopped. Let's take a look here and see if we can find out what happened up through 50. It found an entity, minecart writable.name. Don't know why the .name is in there, but it seems to have worked out just fine, and we have escaped out to go take a look at our minecart and see where it is. So we've converted our finite loop, our infinite loop, into a finite loop. We've added in some air. As you can see, we've gotten rid of things that are nearby, air with air blocks. And so next time what we'll do is we'll continue our exploration with some additions to the features that one might use in order to be able to code using command blocks as you would C# or Java. So that's about it. Thanks for watching.